right? In the name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. The topic, as you can see on the screen, is why the youth leave the church, and what is our role in addressing those reasons. It's a serious topic, and one that was kind of, at some level, imposed on me a little bit. I was asked to figure this out. And so I started asking a lot of people, talking to a lot of people, went on a lot of online Reddit chats, ex-cops, progressive cops, Coptic queer, all of it, and read a lot of stuff. Found surveys made by the Eastern Orthodox Church where they surveyed like 500 churches, read stuff that the Catholics did, read stuff that the Protestants did, read stuff that, just evangelical American churches did, and try to get at this issue a little bit. And it's a very common issue, right? So it isn't a Coptic church phenomenon by any stretch of the imagination. America, is constantly talking about this topic and how church attendance is way down. And the percentages are in the 20s and the 30s of people staying in the church. I would venture to say that the Coptic number isn't too far off of that. And there's sort of this silent exodus that happens, which is just, I start coming every week and every other week and every third week and every fourth week and then every other Eid. And then it's just sort of a silent kind of, it's not an open, I'm going to throw a Bible at the priest kind of walking out of the church, but it's a quiet one, right? Or I'm just not into it, or I'll show up late, or, whatever, right? And it's an issue, right? And as an old person who's been in America for 53 years, I look at my youth groups growing up, people my age, the old people, the ones who are almost dead, like myself, and the numbers are horrible. I look at my youth group and how many of them are still around. Not many. A lot of them are atheists. A lot of them, and we all did tazbih together for years and stuff like that. So we're all raised in the church. This isn't the group that just, disintegrated. And there's just tons of people, right? I'd say the number of people outside of the Coptic people that don't go to church way outnumber the number of people in the churches. And in some churches, you go and you say, who here has been in America longer than 10, 15 years? And you don't get very many hands. Oh, church is just newcomers, right? So that sort of masks the problem as well. I think we don't feel it. Our churches are packed. The money is flowing. It's all good, right? And the immigrants just fill the pews. And so we have this immigration. We have an influx of people coming in. But our organic retention, our organic growth is nil to nil, right? So it's negative, right? So we have to be thoughtful about, addressing these issues. And I want to be very careful to say this isn't a anti-church talk. As you can see, I'm wearing a black dress. I'm part of the church. I love the church. This is my church. And I love my church. And I'm engaged in this. I'm engaged in this activity because of my love for the church and because of my love for the people in the church who, when you hear their stories as to why they leave and what happened, it's painful and pain sucks. And nobody should go through that, especially at the hands of other people in the church, at the hands of your parents, at the hands of the clergy, at the hands of your Sunday school teacher. There's trauma here, right? And some of it quite real. So, that's my interest. Is there something we can do systematically as a congregation, as a church, to try to address these issues and prevent more people from getting hurt down the road? And what can we do to kind of, and I think awareness is the first issue, right? So sometimes just being aware allows you to then, make a call in the moment when you've heard something. So anyway, that's a picture of two people leaving a church, in case you're wondering. That's my graphics for the day. Desmond Tutu has this amazing quote that I love, and he says, "There comes a point where we need to stop pulling people out of the river. We need to go upstream and find out why they're falling in the first place," right? And, so some of the people that, when Sayyidina Basarpian talked to me about this, he's like, we're really losing people in the 20s. That's where we need to focus. And I'm kind of like, the people in the 20s decided to stop coming when they were in junior high. That's where we need to focus, right? We need to go upstream and see what we can do to figure out how we got to this point, right? Because a lot of people say things like, the dorms, freedom ruins kids. And I don't think freedom ruins anybody. I think freedom is God-given, right? I think freedom exposes what's inside, right? And freedom allows me to do what I want. And if I choose not to be Christian, then something happened back when I was in grade school that led me to that decision, right? Now, of course, bad company corrupts good morals and all that other good stuff, and I'm sure that happens, right? But that's not going to make me leave God, right? Unless there was something else going on. So we kind of need to work backwards a little bit and figure out, why is all this stuff happening, and what's my role, at least, in preventing it, or at least not perpetuating it. And so some of the things I'll tell you about, I just want you to be made aware that some of these things are just kind of hardwired in us. And we're going to do them, right? The things you hate that your parents did, you're going to do them to your kids after you swore you will not. And you'll start acting like your parents and talking like your parents and thinking like your parents, despite your best efforts. Say, Michael, you brought games. You came late and you brought games. All right, I can see where your priorities are. Not Jesus, that's for sure. All right. So what? Couldn't care less. Oh, is that my hat? All right, thank you. Better not be wearing my hat. I want to match with you. Oh, thank you. All right, I just don't want my head to go into that, anyway, okay. All right, so this isn't just a Coptic problem. According to 2023 survey, 28% of all Americans classify themselves as nuns. So that's a third. 17 are atheists, 20 agnostic, 63 is nothing in particular. And 43% of people aged 18 to 29, that's your age, classify as nuns. That's almost, double the average of. So this is a young person problem, right? It's obviously not Coptic focused at all. And I want to kind of get into Sunday school just for a little bit. So sort of like Sunday school is seen as this panacea of what's going to fix everything, right? And if we just get them to Sunday school and we get them to hymn class and we get them to the things, right, it's all going to work out. But we have to realize the context of Sunday school, right? When Habib Girgis, Saint Archdeacon Habib Girgis, started Sunday school and Pope Shenouda started Sunday school as Nazir Gayed, Egypt was in a time of massive ignorance, right? There were no books. There was no education. There was a lot of just ignorance about the church, okay? And so these guys brought a bunch of books from all over the place, some Protestant, some Catholic, some whatever, right? They put them in a place, right, in Giza, and everybody would drive to Giza, read the book, write on a little tablet from the book, and then go to different villages and dispense information, right? And that's the best you can do, right? There's no videotape, there's no audio cassettes, there's no internet, there's nothing, right? But now we have Google, right? If I need to learn about St. Athanasius, I don't need a second-rate lesson from my Sunday school teacher, right? I can Google him. I can Google anything. Right? And I can get a 2-page summary, a 20-page summary, or a 2,000-page dissertation on any topic I want, right? So information dissemination is not our issue now. It's not a problem we have, right? No one needs that. What we have other things, right? We have loneliness, we have depression, we have anxiety, we have these personal issues that are really this idea of connection and community and isolation. These are the issues of our time that need to be addressed, right? And what we don't want to do is throw an old solution at a new problem. We need to be dynamic in the way we think. And we say, well, Pope Shenouda came up with something that everyone, by the way, accused him of being Protestant. They're like, the Protestants do Sunday school. Habib Girgis stole it from the Protestants, right? And he was accused of being a Protestant, which is like, the biggest crime in the world. And they're like, yeah, it's a great idea. We're going to use it. We need it, right? And so we have to be equally dynamic and say, well, if it's good enough for Egypt in the 1950s, it's good enough for us. I don't think that's a very wise approach, right? I think there's a better approach we can think about, right? So Sunday school doesn't raise spiritual children. That's not how that works. It's a mediocre information dissemination device. It's not very good. Usually, most of the time, you're spent shushing all the kids and telling them to be quiet, and I'm going to tell your parents if you don't stop talking. And it creates sometimes an adversarial relationship between the servant and the kids, right? We all remember the tant or uncle who's just like yelling at us half the time. Those are my donuts.
Yeah, I just noticed.
Yeah.
Sorry.
The apple fritter is mine. Like, I'm just going to say that. Okay? Huh? There's an apple fritter in there.
There's a peach and blueberry.
Oh, peach and blueberry fritter?
They're separate.
Okay. Both of them are mine. Okay, someone keep them away from Michael because I don't believe him. Okay, so it may not be effective right now, and even if you think about middle school and up, we have to ask the question, is Sunday school even the right approach for a middle schooler or a high schooler? Right? You see the high school kids sitting there, right? They're all looking at their phones. They can't handle more than 4 seconds of anything, right? So we got to ask ourselves, we can curse them and say, oh, you bad kids, you're all corrupted by social media, you're horrible, and you're the worst. And we can keep doing that for a while, and that's fun. And we can feel really good about ourselves doing that. But in the end, we have to ask ourselves, like, should we be changing our approach to them, right? Instead of just cursing them for being born when they were born, right? And so whether or not that's the right approach, or whether or not a discipleship-based approach, right, which is what Jesus did, which is what the apostles did, which is what the monks did, which is what the fathers did, where they discipled people, right? Shouldn't that be the approach versus an information dissemination approach? So head knowledge, servant certification, certificate to serve are largely seen as a bore and a deterrent to serve in Sunday school sometimes. Sunday school is primarily a place to lecture, is a room for listening, is a room for discussing, forming a relationship so the servant can follow up outside afterwards, right? I mean, so what's my goal as a servant? Isn't my goal to create a relationship because I want this kid to call me in 5 years and not ask his friend about contraception, right? I want to create that relationship with the kid, okay? That should be my objective as a Sunday school teacher, to form a bond with them that lasts the rest of their life. Not, you really need to know when the Council of Nicaea was. By the way, when was the Council of Nicaea? 325 AD. Good, right? Council of Constantinople? 381. Council of Nicaea? 431. Good. Losers, all of you, right? So you're all going to go to hell, right? Because that's the exam on when you go to, the pearly gates with St. Peter. He's going to say, when was Council of Ephesus? And you don't know. You're out. Okay. I'm just kidding. Right? So.
During COVID.
Huh?
We skipped it during COVID.
You skipped that lesson. That's fine. Right? So, and what this causes is like a burnout among servants, right? Because the servants are like sick of shushing kids, sick of kids not listening, sick of kids, it's not working. And we just keep trying to put this square peg in a round hole, and everyone's frustrated. The kids hate it. Kids, you watch them leave Sunday school. Just look at the reaction when they leave Sunday school. The excitement and the happiness and like they just won the freaking lottery, right? And running out, and you're like, wow, you really did a good job in there because your kid can't wait to leave, right? So, anyway. Okay. I'll say this. I don't know. I'll be a little controversial, right? So, I want to talk about, like, the Eucharist, right? And the importance and the centrality of the Eucharist, okay? What is the Eucharist? It's taking the body of Christ, right? And what am I supposed to do with that? What am I supposed to do with that?
Serve.
I like that, right? So I love this saying. The liturgy starts when we leave church. Liturgy starts when church ends, right? Because church isn't a place I go to. Church is a place I go from, right? So this Eucharist, this is the fountain of life, right? This is where we meet Christ. Think of the Samaritan woman coming up this Sunday. Although we're not going to read about the Samaritan woman, we'll read about the Annunciation, but that's another story. So he meets her where? At a fountain, at a well, and instead of just getting water, she gets the fountain of life. She gets the living water. And what does she do? She goes nuts, right? Her whole life changes in half an hour. Is that possible? Yeah, absolutely. Right? In fact, I would argue it's very hard to come in face to face with Christ and not change. So she changes. She becomes a missionary, the first evangelist, right, in half an hour. So she comes. It's almost like a little model of the church, if you will. She comes. She drinks from the living water, from the fountain of life. And then she does what? Goes out. Spreads. Let me tell you about this guy who told me everything I did, right? In fact, the Catholic Church has an interesting word for the liturgy. Does anyone know what it is?
Work of the people?
No, that's what the word liturgy means. What does the Catholic Church call their liturgy?
Mass.
Mass. What does mass mean? Doesn't mean like a growth in your, chest or anything like that. Mass comes from the Latin ita missa, which means go, this is the dismissal. So they call their liturgy the dismissal. Why would you call your liturgy the dismissal? It's kind of a weird name. Because this is the place you go to get dismissed, from which you get dismissed. And what do you do when you get dismissed? You go, you become the light of the world, right? So theoretically, this is now my time to take Christ and then be Christ everywhere I go, to every person I meet, in every interaction, work, school, play, gym, you name it, every place I go. And the idea is, I just received love from God. I need to go and give that love to other people. His love, not my love, right? You've just come and drunk from the fountain of life. Be a fountain of hope and love for all those you meet this week. Be hope for people. Be encouraging for people. Be there for people. God was there for you. You take, and then you go, and you give. Now, this is what we're called to do, right? When I leave the liturgy, I'm supposed to do those things. That's what it's all about. That's what it's all about, right? How many times, I'm going to ask you, have you heard someone say these things about the liturgy, about the Eucharist? About when you leave the liturgy, and when you're leaving now, when we dismiss you, liturgy now is starting. Now it's time to be love. Now it's time to be mercy. Now it's time to be love and forgiveness for all these people around you. I'm telling you, I'm 53, I'm old. I've heard these things said, 5 times in my life. Right? What have I heard when I leave the liturgy? Don't spit for 9 hours. Don't swim for 9 hours. Don't chew gum for 9 hours. Don't throw up for 9 hours. Don't walk barefoot in case you get a small cut for 9 hours. Don't brush your teeth for 9 hours. I've heard that 1,000 times. Now, I don't know where these rules came from. I don't know where 9 hours came from. Okay? And I'm not even going to get into the origin of these things. I can assure you these things, these 6 points, are nowhere in the Fathers. Just going to put that out there. The first 4, they're all over the Fathers. These last 6, that's not patristic by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, if you can find it more than 100 years ago, that's great. Okay? That's what's emphasized. A lot. That's what you do when you leave the liturgy, is you don't spit. Do I love anybody? No, that's stupid. Don't worry about that crap. Am I supposed to show forgiveness and mercy? No. We judge people and talk about them. At church, actually. As you're leaving the line, right? You can just turn around and give people a dirty look. And so, I see what you're wearing. Yeah. I see your shoulders. Right? Okay. So, yeah, I don't even want to show this one. I'm not going to do that. I should, but I'm becoming less rebellious in my old age. No, you really don't. It's a clip. It's a clip from Instagram of a priest talking to his congregation, and it's horrendous. Okay. It's in Arabic anyway, so you guys you're all basically white people, so you don't know. All right, so in discussion with a lot of youth and a lot of people, I want to talk about these 11 points that sort of come up a lot on why we have. Let me see, how did I set this up? Oh my gosh, this talk's gonna take forever. I'm really tired. I don't got time for this. Okay. I grouped them together using AI, which is really a cool tool if you haven't heard about it. Yeah, and I was hoping for a round of applause. That old man used for it. No, stop. All right. So what are the main themes that come out of why people are sort of disenfranchised? And this, again, isn't applicable just to the Coptic church or the Orthodox church or the Catholic church, really to a lot of churches. First thing is church dynamics and practices. The church is treated as a system of religious practices rather than a real relationship with Christ, right? So when we reduce the church to doing things, and the more things I do, the more happier God is with me because I've done more things, well, then I don't really have a relationship, right, with my Father. I have a relationship with things. I have a relationship with rituals. I have a relationship with the church. And I can even say things like, I love the church. It's kind of a scary thing to say, right? Shouldn't I say I love Christ through the church? Or should I say I serve the church? Don't we say I serve God through the church? Do I serve the church? Do I serve kids? Do I serve God? Do I serve Abuna? Do I serve God? Do I serve the bishop or do I serve God? Do I serve parents or do I serve God? We serve God, don't we? So we don't serve things, right? So when my relationship becomes with the thing, then we have a bit of an issue, right? It's kind of like getting on a train. And someone says, where are you going? I say, I don't care. I just love trains. So I just hop on. Well, this one's going to Minnesota. Well, that's okay, as long as I'm on a train. Well, now you're probably mentally ill, right? It means you got a thing with trains, and maybe you love trains, and that's okay, right? But don't tell me that you are excited about the train. Church is the train. These are the tracks, right? I get on the track keeps me in one direction, but I'm going somewhere. And if I don't look up and see where I'm going, and that's my goal, I'm not on this train because I love trains. I'm on this train because I want to get to, Santa Barbara, wherever this train's taking me, okay? Disillusionment with liturgical worship and emphasis on rituals, right? Again, we can lose sight of the big picture, right? I'll tell you guys a story. I saw this with my own eyes. And this little boy goes running into he's like 3 or 4. He goes after the liturgy. He goes running into the altar with his shoes on, right? You all know how this ends, right? Some human being, right? Deacon picks him up, old man. Ibn Min da, whose kid is this? And this kid is now screaming and crying. Makes his mother come out of hiding and make the walk of shame in front of everybody. Don't you know he can't walk in with his shoes on? Makes a big scene, right? Honestly, if I was the priest, I would have excommunicated that guy on the spot. I would have said 2 weeks, no communion, until you think about what you just did and about what God you worship. Because if your God is the God of 3-year-olds can't wear shoes, and you're going to humiliate another human being and embarrass her, wrong God. I don't think you get why we're here, right? So a lot of people saw that. Now, luckily, I just got angry, wanted to punch the guy out, but I knew better. There's a lot of people like, what kind of church is this, right? And that has to be not us, right? And unfortunately, now every once in a while, I'll see a 20-something, some kid will run with the shoes on, and the 20-something, who should know better, is pulling the same stupid stuff that they saw, which is, the shoes, Slow down. That's a child. You're going to relax. God's okay. It's going to be okay, right? We got to make sure we're not putting, as Jesus said, right? The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath, right? Very important. The lack of spiritual meaning in hymn class, right? Where hymn class unfortunately becomes, say after me, shut up and say it, right? And the whole time you're spent yelling at the kids, telling them to be quiet, saying it right, creating competition between the kids. Oh, he's much better than you are. What is that? Right? Someone was given a gift and someone wasn't. Don't shame the boy, right? And many of us are dropouts from hymn class, right? There's 20 kids in the hymn class. The one kid makes it. He's the guy in the mic. He made it. Where'd the other 19 go? What do they feel like? Garbage. Because men are supposed to know hymns. We're supposed to be deacons. That's what we do, right? So Let's emphasize prayer. Right? You know, think about Christ and prayer first, and then do whatever you think is right after that. Perception of the church as a closed-off, stagnant museum rather than a living place of worship and forgiveness. Right? And here we come back to the God of preservation. There's a lot of people that think that the church is made for preservation. Like one of the reasons the Coptic church exists is to preserve the Coptic church. Right? And I believe that the church is a hospital. And I don't say I don't believe, I say the fathers believe the church is a hospital where I come for spiritual healing and where I come to find him and where I come to drink from the fountain of life. Jesus never said you're just supposed to preserve old traditions. That's not your job or function. The fathers never said things like that. In fact, the fathers were very dynamic and open-minded and reactionary to the current times and did things that were very intelligent in order to make sure their congregation found Christ in the church. Right? So we have to be careful. We don't want the church to be a museum. The older it is, the better. I mean, that's bragging rights. And we can say, we still do stuff from whatever. And then, see that, Protestants? You're bad, we're good. It's nice. But let's just make sure those things, right, aren't there to be there, but they're there because they bring me closer to Christ. Right? And most of those things do, by the way. Right? But once I lose sense of that, right? So when someone tells me, well, we do this thing because we need to do this thing, as an American mind, I'm like, that was horribly unsatisfying to me, right? Now, if you tell me I do this thing because this brings me closer to Christ like this, I'm all in, right? I'm all in. I won't say I was talking with someone, and we were talking about fasting, and their position was maybe the church's fasts are too egregious and too long and too whatever. And I was like, they probably are. But the real problem with fasting isn't that. The real problem is I've reduced fasting to, kunefa with butter, kunefa without butter, right? And that's just kind of mindless, right? And if my God is the God of you don't eat butter during this period of time, yeah, I'm not. Now, if you can explain to me and convince me of fasting the way it was meant by the fathers, everyone's in. It's an amazing thing, and it's beautiful. But if you tell me, look, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to get out the yummy stuff. You can't tell the difference. We're going to go to all-you-can-eat sushi. It's going to be great. And then you're like, okay, I'm mechanically adhering to this fast. In fact, I'm killing the fast. I'm having all-you-can-eat sushi every day. I am amazing at fasting. Best faster ever. But, I don't know what you're doing. And then you have to stop at some point in your life. You stop and you say, am I doing anything? Why am I doing this? What? Huh? And for us, it's all you can eat sushi. For our parents, it's kunefa without butter and mulachaya that tastes just as good as the real thing. Okay? You're adhering to the rule and you're just knocking out of the park, but, what else are you doing? Emphasis on strict morality and judgmental sermons. I hear these all the time, right? Where it's just about a shame message, a message of shame and guilt, and you're bad, and don't be bad, be good, right? And this isn't really the way Jesus talked ever, or the way the fathers talked, or really anybody talked, right? Church is never meant to be a place of shame and guilt, where I make you feel bad about who you are and what you do, and say, and you need me to go to heaven, right? And it also isn't a place about strict morality. Behavior modification is not the objective of the church. We're not trying to get you to modify behaviors so that's called morality. That's not Christianity. Christianity is Christ-focused. It's got Christ in the name, right? So that's the deal. It's not about modifying my behavior and acting a certain way. It's about finding my Savior and developing my relationship with Him. And through that relationship, wherever He takes me, I go, right? Glorification of the Coptic Church is the only true way to heaven. I don't think people do this anymore, at least not at the churches I've been at lately, but certainly growing up, this is how we were taught, right? It's either here or you're all everyone's on the Hell Express otherwise. No room for disagreement or intellectual stimulation in discussions. This is very frustrating, right? There's a way that people argue, right? And some of it is not very pleasant. Lack of consistency among clergy on certain topics, and there's a part of that that's just human beings, right? People have different opinions, but perception of clergy as not experts in everything and their management style is problematic, right? So these are all the things that people talk about and complain about, right? So that's the kind of the church dynamics and practices, right? So the question is, what do I do about these things, right? I'm a GYPer who goes to the center on Thursday nights. And, what am I supposed to do? Well, first thing is just look at the list and say, all right, I got to kind of make sure I don't fall into these things. I need to stay focused, right? And our worship has to be a Christ-focused worship, and it can't, excuse me, donut. It can't be a preservation-focused worship, a ritualistic-focused worship. It has to be God-centered. It has to be spiritually centered, right? Yes?
I agree. Can I play devil's advocate?
Absolutely. I was expecting you.
I know you were. You know me so well. I think there's kind of a danger, and the danger to me is this. It's that we say okay, this ritual needs to be Christ-centered, or this thing needs to be Christ-centered. And then there's two, maybe two schools of people who want to address the issue, and they say okay, for sure, let's just, get rid of it, or do something different, or try to make it appealing in a different new way, or whatever. And then there's the people who are well, let's look back to what this really is and means and does, right? Which is what you're hinting at. But I think when we say these kind of, the word disillusionment, it's really important to say that it's not an issue with the structure of the worship itself, and it's an issue with how we've taken it and how we've grown with it. And I think part of that is an education issue, but it's also a spiritual education issue, right? And lack of spiritual mentorship, which I know we both agree about, and that the emphasis on just pure education has lost a lot of discipleship, as you said. But I think we can be very eager sometimes to start anew and to just be throw out what we know doesn't work, but there's some good things that might have been thrown out, right? And so there's kind of a need to sift through garbage, or apparent garbage, be okay, what is good and what isn't, and empower people to do that instead of say no, you've been doing it wrong your whole life, and then they're okay, then what do I do now? I'm literally this way now. What do you want me to do? Does that kind of
that makes perfect sense. And no, that makes perfect sense. And I'm not advocating that we throw stuff out, right? Because I believe that there's a lot, I believe there's the church is and I think what you're talking about are hymns in particular, right? But I'm going to talk about.
That's not what I was talking about.
Okay, good. So the church in general, right, is the way I view the Orthodox Church, right, is it's a school, right? So when you guys consider going to a different high school, right? And there's two high schools, right? There's Uni and Crean and whatever other high school, right? How do your parents decide which school that they send you to, right? Well, they look at, the placements, right? And they say, these guys put kids out in UCLA. It's not a very good school, but USC, much better, right? So, I could bet that. So I look at
Worked out for you.
I look at the placements, right? And I say, where do the graduates end up? Well, these guys are making, $250,000 a year on average. Well, I'm going to put my kid in this school, right? So the church is like that, right? And we know the church by its graduates.
Yeah.
Okay? And so what you have is a tried and true tested system, right? In its essence, okay? So any permutation to that system has to be very careful and very slow, right? Mike was telling me about, the talk he went to about this, how the infallibility of the Holy Spirit works in a church in change, and it's always slow. It's not dynamic, or it's not sudden and forceful and watershed moment kind of thing, because that's just disruptive to everybody, right? So one of the things, that's why I'm kind of repeating this as I'm telling you all this, is like, what are we supposed to do about this, right? And the answer is really nothing, right? The things that I'm showing you here is I want you to just read them, and I want you to internalize them, right? And in a few years, when you start doing them, which you all will, try not to, right? And everyone just got to try a little harder, right? And in about 3 or 4 generations, we'll have gotten this out of our system, right? You'll all be dead, but that's okay. Your grandkids will still be alive, and maybe they won't do some of these things, right? So I'm not suggesting we throw things out, right? But I am suggesting being very focused on the meaning behind everything, right? And once I find myself just hitting all-you-can-eat sushi and feeling really good about myself, I have to ask, why am I doing this, right? When I find myself just kind of attending and not really caring, what do I do?
I will say, though, that is an inherent risk in every ritualistic thing we do, right? In every like, even monks have a schedule, and even monks have a system, right? And it's inherent to the lifestyle that you fall in the ritual. And the ritual itself does not lose its meaning then. That's what I'm trying to
And that's a good point. So that's not the point I'm trying to make, right? So the point I'm trying to make is the earlier point you made, which is there's an education fall off here, right? Yeah. So it isn't that I'm saying, fasting is a system on which it's like going to school, right? Sometimes I don't want to go to school, right? My 3rd grader says, I don't want to go to school today. Well, you're going to school, right? I don't feel like the times tables are really going to help me as an adult. That's nice, but we're going to learn them, right? And you're just going to shut up and learn them, right? So there's a system, and you're going to follow that system, and you're going to go, because you know what? We've done high school before, and we know what you need to know, right? So you're not the first one to say, I'm not sure I need this, right? So there's that, okay? And that's the part you have to stick with, right? There's a discipline to the spiritual life that's very important that you stick with. The part I'm talking about is more this education part, right? When and this unfortunately comes a lot from parents, right? From a mindset that's not very Christian, where they say, look, God really cares about butter or no butter, right?
It's Islamic influence.
Sure, right? And now the education is teaching you about who God is through these things, right? So now my theology is off because I'm like, wow, is this what God's about?
Well, yeah, it's a conscience killer, right?
It is. And that education, it's one thing to say, well, I'm just fasting with the motions, but I should be fasting for my spirit. That's one thing. And that's just weakness, and we all do that, and sometimes we fall, and sometimes we get up, no problem. But when you say, no, I read the 9th ingredient on the bagels, and I see the 9th ingredient is eggs on a bagel, and so therefore I am now righteous. Okay, well, it depends on the brand, right? And now I'm a good person because of that. You're like, it's a freaking bagel, just like the other bagel next to it, right? I mean, they're bagels, okay? I buy this brand, although they taste identical. You know what I mean? So now I'm thinking about God in a different way. Like I'll tell you something that was told to me is, if say you're fasting and you're on day 30 of the fast and you break your fast, the first 30 days don't count. And you're just like, what is that?
So pain.
Right? Like, then I remember hearing this as a 14-year-old thinking, what kind of God is this? Like, who is this? Like, I'm not even sure I'm a fan, right? Who would do that? You gotta be a real jerk to do that, right? I wouldn't do that to a kid, So now you're teaching me theology through bad implementation of rituals, and that's an education problem.
Yes.
Here's a question.
Tfadal.
That's a problem with our church. But how are the other churches if we all seeing the same numbers of people dropping out? Assuming that the other churches, you don't have those constraints like we are.
Well, certainly this is the issue with the Eastern Orthodox Church, same thing. The Eastern Orthodox Church has a different issue, which is they didn't make the transition out of culture as quickly as we did, right? So they're like, we're Greek, right? And 5 generations in, the kids are like, Dad, I'm not Greek, and I don't understand a word, and this isn't my identity. And they're like, no, shut up and be Greek, right? So they had a cultural difference. And the Protestant church has a different issue that has people leaving. They actually have a lack of depth, right? And so people convert to Protestantism at very, very high numbers. Their ability to evangelize is huge, but then their retention is much worse, right? We don't evangelize anybody, right? I mean, nobody comes to the Coptic church, right? But we have cradle Orthodox, right, who grow up in it and just sort of don't understand it and then sort of fade away. They're able to bring in large numbers, but then after a while you're kind of like, okay, now what, right? So I think each church has its own issues.
The Catholic Church has a perception of legalism that America dislikes greatly.
Yeah. I mean, if you read a Catholic, a catechism book, I mean, it's something else, right? And if you read their canon law and the way they write, I mean, it's very precise and just legalistic. And God is this accountant of rules and all these things, and and everything's classified and named, and it's organized. It's super organized. So I think every church, look, it's full of human beings, right? And there's a culture that comes with every country, right? And there's parts of the culture good and parts of the culture bad, right? Same with America, same with Egypt, same with China, whatever, right? Good and bad in every culture, right? And so sometimes the bad parts of the culture make their way into the religion, right? And then what you have in America right now is sort of a once-in-a-lifetime thing, right? Because let's take the Coptic church. You have a church that's been in one country for 2,000 years. It's Egyptian. It's Pharaonic, right? It's everything Egypt. And then you say, okay, now move it to another country. That doesn't happen ever in the history of anything, right? And you have America being this one place, and maybe Australia and England, where a bunch of churches from other countries move to. It's just weird, right? It just doesn't happen in the history of the church. So we're dealing with a very unknown commodity, right? But the church will pivot just slowly, right? Yes, Mike.
When you said do nothing, you meant just don't riot, right?
Yeah, don't burn down the chairs.
Yeah, okay. Because to me, I think, like you said, it's a matter of education, knowing where all this supposedly blind tradition actually comes from and whether it still applies and whatever. Because we're not going to convince the current synod, right, to get rid of anything because they're stuck on a certain way, right? But at some point, the church is in our hands, right? They're gonna pass away. We'll be the ones. Some people here might be in the synod, you know what I mean? So
Natalie.
I think hopefully. So I think if we want to preserve the church for the future, right? I think it's our job to learn really where it all comes from in the first place, right? A lot of us decided to take classes at Acts, for example.
No, I don't want to interrupt you, but I agree with what you're saying 1,000%. So let me refine what I'm saying a little bit, because I think education is the right way to go. And when I said do nothing, I don't mean do nothing I meant don't riot. But what I will say is you have to do a lot, okay? But the only place, and you've all probably heard me say this a million times, right? The only place you can really execute change is within yourself, right? You can't change the nature of this meeting if you tried, right? So changing another person's impossible, changing the culture of a church, changing that uncle and tant over there, good luck.
Yeah,
right?
That's what I'm saying.
You're just going to die frustrated, right? So the best you can do, and this is what I've been saying, you look at this list and you look for it in yourself, right? And it doesn't take much, right? You can have, a lot of dysfunction in a congregation, but you can just have a couple of people, and that's all you really need, right? Somebody that, you can go to when you have a problem. Someone who loves you at church, right? Someone who gets you. And I don't need everyone at church to be perfect. I just need couple people I can relate to, right? That I can call when I'm in a bind, right? And that solves all. So if we can have 5 people at every church, that'd be great. Right? That's a good number. So try to be one of those 5, And all of you really need to think about how you want to invest in the next generation, right? Because how many guys my age interact with youth at churches, right? The old guys, the 50-somethings, right? The ones who are almost dead, the bald ones, right? Not many, right? They're kind of doing their thing and they're working and they're shut up kid, don't bother me, right? And how many people feel comfortable enough going up to some 50-year-old and saying, hey, can we talk about something, right? We just need more of those people. We need more accessible people. We need more people in the community who aren't going to be as judgmental or judgmental feeling, right? And it's our duty to be those people in the church moving forward. And believe me, I was talking with a priest today, and he said the only reason I'm still in the church is because of one guy who hugged me and said, I'm behind you 1,000%. He's like, I was biased. I was a piece of garbage. And this guy said, don't take crap from anybody. I'm with you 1,000%. Someone high up in the church. And he said, that's the only reason I'm still, and now I'm a priest. Right? Doesn't take much.
Yeah, I agree. That's all we can do right now.
Yeah.
But like I said, at some point, the church will be, it'll be up to us to navigate through what we need to navigate through.
Yeah, and St. Augustine has the great quote that I love that you heard me say, love God and do whatever you want, right? So, that I think is an important guiding principle, right? As long as we all have the same bogey, right, then I think we all kind of arrive at the same thing, just naturally, even from different places, right? And each of us has a different talent, a different gift, a different ability from God, different opinion. But, if we're all got our eyes on the same thing, then we all get to the same place, right? The problem I'm seeing is sometimes everyone's looking at a different God, right? There's the God of, you better do this or I'll send you to hell. There's the God of, my job is to preserve this thing. There's the God of, and there's all these different gods. And so when you start having a discussion with someone, they're like, well, no, this is our job is to, judge others. And you're like, wrong God. I don't know which Bible you read, right? But that's what they think their job is, right? Okay, that's just theme 1 of 9. So we're here all night. Yes.
I think if anything, when you just said about people viewing it as a job, it's comes back to me because I was in 4th grade, and sometimes I'm just sometimes getting annoyed of serving Sunday school and such, and going out to church events, and I'm like, oh man, that's a lot, whatever. And then like you said, I think viewing it as or you think you're doing it as a job, sometimes just takes it away from its purpose. And there was another point I wanted to say, but it was in regards to the culture and how we haven't moved out of it. But I feel like that's a whole different dialogue for a whole different day.
Oh no, knock yourself out. We just spent 2 hours out on the clergy meeting today. It was fabulous.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
No, it's just that.
Safe space. I mean, I'm going to judge you because I'm,
Like I said, it's just that because you mentioned how because we're obviously Coptic in the region, I guess we're taking pride over speaking Egyptian and Quranic and all. That we haven't moved on past these traditions and that being fixated on them without maybe keeping an open mind to an extent of different approaches of such and approaching Sunday school a bit differently, and like you mentioned, that we're just looking at it as we're not focusing on the spiritual part. It's just more discouragement, creating competition, and like you mentioned, it just drives people away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, as servants, look, I mean, and this is a common complaint I hear from people your age is the servants who are young are in these Sunday school classes, and some of the times they're serving with people who've come from Egypt or who are older, and they get silenced by the older people, right? Even though they're in a better position to serve the kids, they know what the kids like, and sometimes these older people will be like, no, don't, we're gonna do it like this, and then that frustrates the younger person, and I'm just I'll be sitting there begging these people to stay in Sunday school class, you gotta step up and you gotta stay in there and you gotta stay relevant because, there's a cycle that happens, which is, the people that get frustrated first start leaving, and then all that's left is something else, right? So.
too.
Who wants to go to sleep? All right. Oh, no one's tired?
Just read it. Everyone just read it.
Just read. Any questions? Next. All right. I'll talk about parental influence, family dynamics, since you guys are all going to be families soon. Parents driving kids away from church for various reasons. Disillusionment with the role of women in the home at church. And I will add something here with the role of women. We have to be very careful. Like I said, every church evolves in a culture. Okay? And you cannot distinguish culture. That's perfectly natural, right? You know, culture enters every church. You know, if you're Russian, you practice church Russianly. If you're Ethiopian, you practice it Ethiopianly, right? This is what we do. Well, we have to realize, right, we come from a Arab culture, right? And we can say, oh, we're Coptic culture all we want. We're not. We're Arabs, right? We are Egyptian Arabs, okay? In Egyptian Arab, which is synonymous for Muslim, women are not, like, treated really well. Okay, as you all know, right? So we have to be very careful that sometimes some of the things that we saw, and this is when I say you have to break the cycle, and it's going to take us 3 or 4 generations, right? You have to break the cycle is that some of the stuff the guys saw in your homes was abuse, right? And was Islamic, and was you have to prepare this for me, and I'm the man, and blah, 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 and you know the fingers, see my fingers, what that's doing there, right? That may not be Christian. Some of the stuff we all saw in our homes is not Christian, right? And the opposite happens, right? Which is a lot of women are like, you know, they hear the word submit at the wedding ceremony and they lose their minds, right? And the reason, one possible reason, right, is they watched their mom submit to their dad. And mom was submitting to an abusive person. And when, you know, the daughter asks her mom, why do you take that from dad? She says, well, Habib, you have to submit. No, that's not submission. That's not what was going on there, right? And so a lot of them are very triggered by that word and triggered by that whole concept, right? Because what they saw growing up was ugly and not Christian, right? So we have to recognize we come from a Christian world, a Muslim world. A lot of stuff we do is Muslim. The way we think is Muslim on a lot of topics. And that's natural. That works in Egypt, by the way. That's a great way to be in Egypt, because that's the culture, right? And that's how you express your Christianity, right? Culture is the way. Like, you can't have pure orthodoxy. There's no such thing. What's pure Christianity without culture? No such thing, right? You express it through your culture, through your language, through your rituals, your cultural norms. Right? But we just have to be aware of where our culture is from. Endemic hypocrisy in church tone and certain sins being tolerated while others are demonized. Obviously, virginity of girls is the only thing that matters, and all homosexuals go to hell, right? So these are the biggies, right? But if you're lying, that's okay. Right? Because, it's business. You got to make money. So you got to lie. Of course. You want to gossip? That's just natural. That's just what we do. Right? You want to judge other people? That's who we are. Those things are fine. Okay? But the other things, heaven forbid. Right? That's also cultural. Right? We come from a country where lying is normal. In fact, everyone you meet from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. in Egypt is trying to cheat you. That's just what's happening. Right? And so you expect everyone to be lying. You know, growing up, my dad would be like, he's just saying it. To my dad, every taxi driver has one job. He's the front man on a group that robs houses. They figure out who's out of town. And I was 28 before I figured out that this wasn't true. Right? I was like, every taxi, and I lived in Seattle, so I'm standing in the freaking rain with my suitcase, which is all getting wet, 4 houses down, so that house gets robbed, right? And because you still are, exactly, it's the Arab, right? So, but that's the mindset, right? And then you finally figure out, okay, not every body is trying to rip you off. There's actually people just honest, which is just not not there in that. That's surreal, right? Okay. Negative influence of Arab Islamic mixed with puritanical right-wing culture in church communities, right? So we have this wonderful mix of, right-wing nut jobs and Arab nut jobs, and it all comes together for just a lot of beauty, right? And political discussions at people's homes. Lack of Christian love and example in the home, right? So this is the stuff, and again, like this lack of Christian love and example in the home. I'll just end with this because I'm tired. Like a lot of parents, I talk to parents all the time now and I talk to them in Arabic, which is fun to watch, really, about what it is they can do to raise their kids, And I can't tell you how many parents come up to me and their kid is just, off, and they all say the same thing. I took him to hymn class. He's a deacon. I made him go to Sunday school. I did all of the things, right? And unfortunately, those parents were taught that being a good parent meant you bring them to every ashaya and you bring them to everything. And if they don't come, you hit them with a shoe on their face. And then they show up early and you make them eat tameya and you let them know that tameya is the path to heaven, right? And you force them to eat siyami food and you don't let them eat anything else because then they'll burn, right? And this is what they think being a parent is, right? And instead, what they produced are bitter, angry, cynical kids who can't stand the church and can't wait to get the heck out of Dodge. That's an expression old people say, right? Can get the heck out of the house, okay? So what I tell parents is it is absolutely your responsibility. Your kids are absolutely your responsibility. And I'll tell you how they're your responsibility, right? Is how you treat the waiter at the restaurant, how you treat the gardener, how you treat the maid, how you treat the people who are weaker than you and beneath, quote unquote, you, right? What kind of love do you show in your home? What kind of forgiveness do you show in your home? That's what the kids are going to learn. Don't tell me I forced them to go to hymn class where I went to Starbucks. Big deal, right? Your kids saw you go to Starbucks. What do you think they're going to do when they're 18?
Go to Starbucks.
Exactly, right? So the lesson here isn't, I made them do things. I took them to Sunday school. Were you a living Bible or not? Did they see you have compassion on other people or not? Right? That's the role of the parent. So it's absolutely on the parent, but for some reason all the parents were told, you better bring them to everything. That's what a good parent does. And hit them if they don't come. Well, you see the outcomes, right? Not good. All right, anybody have any questions or comments, criticisms, complaints? We're only on theme 2, which I'm here all night, really. I'll probably collapse soon, but nothing? You guys want the donuts, don't you? Nemo got donuts in honor of me because he knows I have an addiction. Issues.
What is this place? Why is this the... I don't know, sorry.
Can you just run through what the rest of them, just the titles?
Anaya,
What they are.
my eyes. Youth engagement and mentorship. Basically, we need youth mentors, relatable examples of Christ. We need Sunday school that's more engaging. After college, there kind of drops off in the service. Marriage, there's nothing for married people. Shallow and spiritually unedifying activities for youth. We can't let the church be a place of activities. Clergy's disconnect from societal norms and antiquated views. Church community and relationship. This is really important because there's a judgmental feel at church. People are afraid to open up to other people at church, right? So you hide things from the people at church, right? And I can't tell you how many parents say, don't post anything on Instagram. What if the people at church see it, right? That's just a horrible, horrible thing to hear, right? Which means the only person I'm scared of is my body in Christ. That's who I'm scared of. The people I worship with. It's horrible, right? So that creates superficial relationships at church, right? I don't tell you the truth, right? Because you're going to go tell your mom, and then everyone knows, right? So I'll tell my roommate at college. My roommate at college knows everything because they can't get back to me. They can't hurt me like the Egyptians can. right? The Egyptians can gossip about me. My roommate at college, they know better. They're not stupid. They won't share my secrets with their parents. Lack of ecumenism and serving outside the church. We become kind of cultish, right? Where it's us versus them. We're very insular, right? When we talk about the liturgy, for example, we do a lot of talking, and then we do this, and then we do this, and then this means this, and then we do this, and we do this. Okay, that's nice. What are you doing when you leave? What about Monday through Saturday? Right? Tell me about the rest of it. You know, instead of us. Lack of spiritual talks about rituals and their significance. And again, I'm a big ritual guy. I love the church rituals in the liturgy, and they're very deep and very meaningful, but we have to have good education. Perception of clergy is fighting, not good role models, lack of authenticity. Sorry, not in our diocese, but others. Perception of clergy is busy and accessible for guidance and confession. Sexual and societal issues. Churches need to confront sexual issues and make them less taboo. Absolutely. I mean, you know, unfortunately, our biggest thing on earth is a girl's hymen, right? As long as that's intact, everything's good, right? And you read some stuff online from Coptic churches, you know, like, can a girl use a tampon while swimming? And the answer is no, because it could rupture her hymen, and then she's no longer a virgin, which is, wow. And I'm quoting it, am I not?
They have to switch their sport too. They can't switch.
That's beautiful, right? So I'm quoting a Coptic Orthodox website right now. I'm not saying anything. And then, you know, the answer is, but she didn't really lose her virginity, did she? She just had a tampon in. And they're like, well, virginity is very important in our culture. Which culture? The one we left? The Muslim one. And so now, when we have a girl who's no longer a virgin, she has to really just worry about anyone finding out, right? And she's not going to come back. What if anyone finds out? I'm done. My life's over, right? And instead of talking about repentance and the way back, right, all we talk about is don't. Okay. And Jesus most of the time was talking with harlots. So, you know, there's that. A lack of emphasis on addressing contemporary social issues openly, perception of clergy out of touch, perception of the church as all talk and no actions in helping people. Okay. All right. Action plans. And this is just the opposite of everything we said. So we'll just, so do all these things. There you go. Do them quick. All right. Any questions, comments? That's a no. All right, let's eat donuts. And glory be to God forever. Amen.
Thank you for coming.
Anytime.